Well, that is the division bell, and welcome again to the Politico Pub. Thanks for all those who've stayed after Priti Patel's interview with Anne McElvoy. We have transplanted this pub from the Labour conference at Liverpool last week, where it was kind of out windswept and with light shining through by the Mersey, to this slightly odder environment of an exhibition floor. So you can choose which one you prefer. But thank you for coming. I'm Dan Bloom, the UK political editor for Politico, and I'm joined by Jonathan Martin, who's our big shot columnist, basically, from the US, our politics bureau.
I'll take it. I'll take it.
You landed this morning?
Fresh. Thank you, Richard Branson, Virgin Atlantic overnight. You can fly nonstop to Manchester, thanks to Virgin Air. So I came in directly.
Well, there we go. That's your free return flight sorted.
There you go.
And it took overnight, you say, so it's slightly less time than we all took on the train up here. Right, and you've been wandering around. You've been to a lot of DNCs and RNCs. How does it compare?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's a treat to be here in Manchester, and it does remind me a bit of some of the political conferences we have in the States. But our conventions are quadrennial. The beauty of your conferences are every year. So
it's great. Isn't it?
It's fun to be here. I'm struck by the similarities between this party in this moment and the pre-Trump Republican Party. If you just swap Thatcher for Reagan, you would basically have the precise same vibe that you would have had at a GOP, Republican conference, basically between the start of Obama, end of Bush, and the rise of Trump. So if you had gone to one of those conferences between, say, 2007 to 2015, this would have been the vibe. And importantly, if Trump had lost in 2016, this would have definitely been the vibe, because I think then you would have had the fracture that you guys are having now, which is, how do we get Maggie back and just do a version of free enterprise? Adam Smith works, versus, no, you've lost the point. The point is identity, and the point is migration. That split never happened in our country, because Trump won the nomination and then won the general election in 2016. And you all know what happened in the decade since then. But this right here today feels like what almost happened in our country.
I suppose the issue here is that you've got the Conservative Party doing, if that's what you agree, doing that. And then you've also got Reform UK, who are doing much better in the polls.
Precisely.
Also doing the MAGA.
Because they've tapped into the galvanizing issue, a la Trump and MAGA, which is identity. And as illustrated by the issue of migration, but it's really identity more than anything else. I was so struck during Anne's interview just now with Patel about what she said regarding this is not just a British issue. This is happening in Germany. Obviously, it's happening in France. And the reason it's not happening in America is because Trump already took over one of our two major parties. There is no reform in America because there didn't have to be, because Trump won and ended Reaganism and Bushism and started MAGA, and effectively recreated the Republican Party as a reform-style party there. And so the reason why we don't have a AfD or Le Pen or Farage reform movement is because it's already happening. It just is happening within one of our two parties.
Well, there's a lot of people in the Conservative Party who do want to learn from that. There's also a lot who don't, who would not want to take the party that way. But
therein lies the problem, right?
What do you think they can learn? Well, the people in this room from the Conservative Party, what can they learn from Trump that they haven't learned already?
To repurpose the old James Carville line, it's the identity, stupid. It's not the economy, all right? It's the identity. I mean, that's why the migration issue is so galvanizing. But the migration issue is the vehicle to get at the larger issue, which is what the hell happened to my country, right? That's really what the issue is more than anything else. Right? And that's why Make America Great Again was so effective. It could mean a lot of things to a lot of people. And different people had different interpretations of that, right? And I think that's why, Farage has found success by being vague and maybe even unrealistic. But when you're not governing, you don't have to be realistic, right?
Well, we have Make Britain Great Again.
I saw the hat. Yeah, exactly.
Are they here as well? I haven't seen
yeah, there's a hat outside, yeah.
They're at Tory conference too. So the big policy announcement in today is an ICE-style immigration crackdown.
Even down to using the word ICE itself.
Yeah, the Conservatives are using that word. As an American coming over and having written about the ICE stuff, what's if we haven't heard of what the debate is over there,
Well,
tell us what it is.
I can't believe.
Is it just along natural lines, or are there some Republicans?
I never thought I'd see the day where Europeans were embracing ice. Sorry, I had to. It was too easy. No offense. It's totally predictable because they're trying to steal a march on Nigel and reform, and obviously that's the issue that Nigel has tapped into. So the conservatives are saying, all right, you want tough on immigration? We'll do that. And in fact, not just tough, we'll even call it ICE, and we'll say what Trump is doing in the U.S., we'll do here. Not just crack down on the border, not just say stop the boats, but in fact, go after folks that are already here, handcuff them, and deport them, which is precisely what Trump is doing in the U.S. To me, it's the inevitable next step. And I think you could argue politically the necessary step if you're going to steal a march on reform.
When I talk about the debate around ICE, obviously, like some people say on the left here in this country, look at what ICE are doing and are horrified, basically.
Yes.
Is it basically along left-right lines where in the US you've got some people who are like, this is awful, and everyone else is kind of fine with it, basically, or is there quite a lot of unrest on the?
No. So the immigration issue in the U.S. is complicated because we're a nation of immigrants, and that's the whole idea of America is that it's a country that's based on an idea rather than an ethnicity. There's a great line. Joseph Nye, who was a Harvard professor, coined the term soft power, has this great story in which he was talking about the U.S. versus China. And the Chinese said, we have 1.5 billion people with a B. You Americans can't compete with that. And Nye said, oh, yes, we can. We have 6.5 billion people. And the Chinese person said, well, no, you don't. You only have 500 million. No, you don't understand. We're America. We can choose anybody in the world to come to America, and we can get the best Brits, the best Argentinians, and the best Filipinos to come to America because they all want to come to the U.S. and pick. That's not just American chauvinism. The whole point is the beauty of our country and the power and the sort of the secret sauce of American strength and identity has been 250 years of migration and waves of it reviving the country and sort of driving the country. So it's a complicated issue in my country. There's definitely a backlash, as there is here, to what they saw as the broken border under Biden. And there was a desire to crack down on that. There's no question that Biden and Kamala Harris lost last year in part because the border was chaotic. However, it's a very different issue in America when you talk about closing the border, getting tough on criminals who are coming into this country, than going after folks who are in this country illegally, but who otherwise are good citizens, paying taxes, raising families, and trying to live the American dream. When you have images of grandmothers, for example, or just even day laborers being handcuffed and thrown to the ground, that doesn't resonate well with the broad center of American life. It's a little different in our country. So that's why it's delicate for Trump. Now, Trump himself, I think, is more squeamish on the issue, but some of Trump's advisors, including J.D. Vance, Stephen Miller, obviously, are much more hardline on the issue. But it's a more complicated issue for us. Theoretically, folks like tough borders, tough on crime, deportations of people who were grandmothers, a little tougher in America.
I want to give you a rank these people out of 10 question for how much they cut through in DC.
Okay.
How much DC cares about them.
Okay.
And because we're Britain, I mean,
yes.
Let's start with Britain. How much do the people in DC talk about us?
Well, Oasis is back on tour, so that's big. No, they filled the Rose Bowl in California. You kidding, man? That's huge for us. In all seriousness, Americans love the royals. Americans are fascinated by Churchill. Thatcher probably. Present day, I don't think there's that much engagement. I mean, it's mostly, what are our British cousins up to? But it's, nobody in my country, if you grab 10 people in St. Louis or Denver or Minneapolis, could tell you the leader of the Conservative Party.
Well, one of my names was going to be Kemi Badenoch. So.
Yeah. Now, if you're talking about like New York, D.C. policy circles, of course, it's a very different story, but the average American is not following what's happening in Britain all that closely.
Keir Starmer a little bit more? Just
Sure, because he's the head of government and would get more coverage in the U.S. So I think there would be at least a vague recognition of who Keir Starmer is, certainly. You know what's interesting? Tony Blair is still, I think, probably a pretty big deal in the U.S. Tony Blair, by name and by face, would probably be the best-known living former prime minister. I think even more than Boris. What do you think? Probably, yeah. I mean, Tony or Boris, yeah.
Why do you think that is?
You know, Boris's hair helps a lot, you know. That breaks the rule.
It helps here.
Why? Too. Oh, because Blair and Clinton, New Democrat, New Labor. For people of a certain age, if you're over 50, you remember the 90s. You recall the two youthful leaders on both sides of the Atlantic. And also, he was there for so long and really consequential times. Not just Clinton, but Bush, Afghanistan, Iraq War. Blair is, you know, there for all those years. I think Blair sticks out in a lot of ways.
What about Nigel Farage?
So, in political circles, absolutely. You know,
GB News over here, just
they're trying to move to the U.S. Yeah, especially on the right. Nigel Farage, certainly. You know, Nigel Farage has this fascination with America. He spends a lot of time in the States. I'll never forget. In 2017, we had a by-election in Alabama, of all places, because Trump's first Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, vacated a Senate seat, and so there was a there was a by-election in Alabama in 2017. And never forget waking up at a hotel on Mobile Bay down near the Gulf of Mexico. I'm sorry, Gulf of America. One morning at breakfast, and I look up and there's this guy pacing on the lawn, smoking a cigarette, wearing a barber coat in like 65-degree weather, talking on a cell phone. I was like, God damn it, is that Nigel Farage out there? I think I'm sober right now, but it really looks like him. I got up for breakfast, walked outside, and I was like, sure enough, that's Nigel Farage. He and Steve Bannon are very close and have been for years. And Bannon brought Farage over to help in the Alabama Senate election. I'm not sure who in Mobile, Alabama was moved by Nigel Farage in 2017, but I just used that story because he's been around American conservative politics for a while now, since the start of Trump, really. He's been there from day one. I thought there was a chance that when Trump won last November, that he was going to actually call Keir and say, "Can you make Nigel the ambassador to the U.S.?" Because Trump loves Nigel.
Nigel would have liked that too.
Well, if Nigel could have been both leader of reform and ambassador at the same time, and had a place in D.C., place in New York, place in London, it would have been great. But he couldn't quite work it all out. Sure, right.
Yeah, because there was this idea that Nigel Farage basically had fallen out of favour, didn't have the same influence that he did. Do you think that was a confection?
So much for that.
Do you think
that. You tell me. What do you think?
Well, it certainly seems he's over a lot, but we've got this funny thing in the UK where we've also got Keir Starmer in a very, very different way, being kind of playing nice, being buddies with Donald Trump, and kind of.
I was so struck by the
different, but yeah,
interview. Oh my gosh! Yeah. I was so struck by the interview. That's the pride of Sky News here. Come on, don't leave. Come on, you can stay. It's all right. He's breaking news. He's going to the pub. Come on. So I was so struck by the interview of Starmer where he was pressed. I'm not sure if that was Sky News or who that was, but he was pressed about, well, how can you call Nigel Farage racist and his party racist, but then excuse everything Trump is doing? And Starmer was saying, well, it's different. Well, how is it different? And he fell back on the important thing is that the defense relationship between the U.S. and the U.K. has never been stronger. But like with Peter Mandelson, like with so many Brits who've said stuff about Trump publicly in the last 10 years, it's tough to reconcile what you said in the past or what you're saying now about Nigel Farage with what Trump is and what he does, because isn't the same sort of standards apply?
Right, it's what Keir Starmer does best. He manages to kind of present the narrative that he needs to.
In the moment. But no, he has chosen clearly to try to stay on Trump's good side. Look, all of these foreign leaders have figured it out, which is you got to give Trump something, right? Tim Cook at Apple figured it out too. He got Trump a really cool watch. So Nigel Farage knows Trump loves the royal family. He shows up there for that first bilateral meeting and says, I have here in my pocket, pulls out paper, this parchment from the king himself is going to invite you to a never before unprecedented second state visit. And Trump thinks this is hot shit, right? The Germans bring over Trump's family's immigration papers. The Qataris bring a plane, right? So like all these foreign leaders and companies have figured out you got to bring something for Trump. I'll never forget the poor president of South Africa comes to the Oval Office. Trump springs Elon Musk on him, for God's sake. Poor guy, totally ambush. And the poor president says, "Mr. Trump, I'm so sorry. I don't have a plane to bring you." It was perfect, right? Because every other country has brought Trump something. And so that includes Keir. So Keir has played Trump well, or as well as you can play him, because Trump loves the royal family. But it's Trump. It's a one-way street. You can give him flattery. You can give him a second state visit invite. You can give him, the best Yorkshire pudding in the world at Windsor Castle. It's just like ultimately Trump is for Trump. Chris Christie, who you guys know, the former Jersey governor, who was for Trump and then kind of had a falling out, has a great expression that really captures this well. Christie says, if your name is not Ivanka Trump, meaning everybody else in the world besides his daughter, if your name is not Ivanka Trump, you start with 100 points of capital in the bank with Trump. And it only goes one way. It only goes south. Everybody eventually runs out of capital with Trump.
We've basically held on about 85 and we're just managing.
The clock is ticking, brother. The clock is ticking. Exactly.
Or maybe 75 or 65,
yes.
depending on
So I want to ask you, though, because we're here in the UK. We're on your turf. Are we at the bronze medal conference here? I mean, are we talking to folks who are going to be players when 2029 comes around? Are they even going to be in the game? Or is reform the future?
I think that's the question a lot of people at this conference are asking, probably a little bit more off the record, but some on the record in the speeches
yes.
as well. Like they know, people in this room know that they are in third place very solidly in the polls. They're only just ahead of the Lib Dems. And they have to pull it round somehow and become not just the opposition party in terms of like doing it in Parliament, but in terms of actually doing it out in the country. Yeah. And that's part of what this kind of blitz of policy, I think, this week is all about. It's just whether it can be listened to and people notice, I think is the real problem, because once you have another party, on the right, Reform, making loud noises about stuff, the space for the airtime and the headlines is incredibly narrow. And this conference is pretty much the only chance.
In her speech, the leader said effectively that Reform and Labor are the two sides of the same coin. They're both offering identity politics, not solutions. They're not offering realistic solutions. I spoke to a couple of former prime ministers who lost last year, tough election, and they said, well, Nigel's galvanized folks. They're angry at the status quo, but they don't offer any realistic solutions. Isn't the whole point of an opposition party to be an opposition? Do you have to offer realistic solutions, or can Reform get away with not offering solutions and just run on anger and win?
Well, I think the interesting thing is that the slogan here is stronger borders, stronger economy. And on the one hand, on stronger economy, the party is basically saying, trust us. We can manage the money much better than Reform, who are profligate and will spend it on raising, benefits and cutting tax. But on the borders, they're saying we're going to go hard, we're going to go fast, and we're going to deport 150,000 people a year. So it's like two messages aimed at two different audiences.
Yeah. Is there any policy coherence to Reform besides migration? Because you have folks who are kind of like almost socialist on the left with also sort of far right types too under the same tent. Is that eventually going to bite Reform, or does that matter because the actual cohesive isn't policy? It's actually just anger at the status quo.
I think at the moment, a lot of people are projecting what they want to onto Reform. And even some people in Reform say, this is brilliant, like nothing can touch us at the moment. And the hope in the Tories and in Labour is that basically this is Nigel Farage's time to be walking on water, you can't do anything wrong, etc., etc. And then that will just slip. It's a combination of, journalists and other people will start actually asking how he's putting these policies together and whether they make sense, because there's huge holes in the kind of numbers and stuff.
But does that matter anymore? Does that matter anymore, though?
Well, the other hope is that the public support will split. And I'm not sure those two things are connected necessarily. I mean, they should be.
The best case scenario that I hear out there is, 4 years is a long way away. I mean, right? There's still time yet. Lots can happen. Which is not a strategy.
We're nearly at time, but
sorry.
I assume quite a lot of these people are interested in this room are interested in American politics. So I want you to give your 1 minute guide to what people should be looking out for in the midterms and the Democrats.
Sure. Well, we're less than a month now from the governor's elections in 2 states, Jersey and Virginia, in our country, and the mayor's race in New York City. Those are kind of the 3 big off year races that we have. Democrats are favored in all 3. Not a lock in Jersey. It's probably the closest one, but Democrats favored in all 3. Of course, in New York, it's more complicated because you have a socialist who has become the Democratic nominee, to the great unease of a lot of more moderate Democrats. And the former governor, Andrew Cuomo, is trying to run against him, and it's sort of a third party. Probably isn't going to be able to get there, but that has created some real tension inside the Democratic coalition.